All right, hello, and welcome back from the coffee break. Great to see everybody here at the St. Regis, as well as all those joining us virtually from around the world. I'm Jason Marzek, Vice President and Senior Director at the Adrian Arch Latin America Center here at the Atlantic Council, and so pleased to be sharing the stage with this excellent group of speakers who I will introduce momentarily. But in true Atlantic Council fashion, as a global institution, today we have cut across regions, from Africa to Belarus, and across issues, from health innovation to journalism in the times of authoritarianism. So what binds these issues together? They, of course, represent some of the people, the ideas, and the forces shaping the world, the theme for our Global Future Forum. One of the forces shaping the world is the force of sustainable development. And I'm so pleased to be with these speakers to talk about how the Western Hemisphere, Latin America, and the Caribbean is pioneering global solutions. Looking at specifically what is the role of the region in creating a more sustainable path future in the decades ahead. Latin America and the Caribbean certainly has the potential, and how do we bank on that potential moving forward is going to be some of the discussions of this panel. As countries globally embark on an energy transition, the region is clearly a clean energy powerhouse. 30% of its energy comes from renewable sources. In Central America or Brazil, that figure is up to 80%. The region also holds critical minerals necessary to advance our transition, becoming home to 2/3 of the world's lithium, 38% of the world's copper. So how did the region build on these opportunities? How does it also build these opportunities when we look at issues like global food insecurity, water scarcity, some of the issues that we've been looking at the Atlantic Council? Latin America and the Caribbean possesses great agricultural land and water availability, 15% of the world's land area, but 29% of global precipitation and 33% of globally available renewable resources, 40% of the world's fresh water. These are just impressive numbers, all telling the importance of what this region could provide for the global community writ large. To be able to tap into these opportunities, though, it's important that regional governments, multilateral banks, and the private sector collaboratively work forward for solutions. So against this backdrop, I'm very pleased to be able to advance this conversation, which follows the continued commitment to sustainability that we do across Latin America and Caribbean, including with longtime private sector partners like Coca-Cola, with whom we work with sustainability across the region for quite some time. Now, today in this panel, representing crucial actors in the sustainability area are my three panelists. With a public sector perspective and the Brazilian government more specifically, it's great to be joined by Secretary Renata Amaral, a longtime friend of the Atlantic Council. Renata is the Secretary for International Affairs and Development at the Ministry of Planning and Budget in Brazil. Also, Alicia Montalvo. Alicia is the Manager of Climate Action and Positive Biodiversity at the Development Bank of Latin America, CAF. She has a background in government and academia. Also, Mauricio Cárdenas. Mauricio is a professor of professional practice and global leadership here at Columbia University. He's also, of course, former Minister of Finance, as well as Energy and Mines in Colombia. But actually, for me, most important is he is a member of the Advisory Council of the Adrian Arch Latin America Center. So, Mauricio, great to have you, Renata and Alicia. What we're going to do over the next 50 minutes is we'll dive into Latin America's importance for global sustainability, the path forward for cross-sector collaboration to advance that sustainability, and then also look at how the broader global community can also help Latin America and the Caribbean, and hopefully have each of you walk away with some tangible ideas. So I want to start with you, Renata. The title of the panel, Sustainable Development, How Latin America and the Caribbean Are Pioneering Solutions. And I'd like to start to talk a little bit about Latin America's relevance to the world, and particularly what Latin America contributes. Now, Brazil, of course, is in a very important position, host of the G20, and we're glad to be there for the finance ministers meeting in July. Also, a number of other convenings leading up to the leaders meeting this coming November. But some of the priorities of Brazil alongside the G20 have been fight against poverty and hunger and equality, but also advancing 3 dimensions of sustainable development. So how are these issues of global priority for Brazil, and how can Brazil's leadership help to advance new solutions, especially in the sustainable development front?
Well, thank you, Jason. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm indeed an old friend of the Atlantic Council, and thank you for the invitation to be here. This is a busy week, right? I don't know how you're feeling, but I'm exhausted already.
That's why I just cracked up my soda.
And it's only Tuesday.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. It's a long week. But I think this question is very, very important. Just to provide a context within Brazil, some of you might have heard or read that we had horrible floods in the south of the country a few months ago. It compromised nearly 90% of the territory of Rio Grande do Sul, more than 400 cities. And now, as we speak, we have fires everywhere around the Amazon. And this was in the speech of President Lula this morning as well. The country is mobilized, the federal government's mobilized to seize the fires, but honestly, it was beyond the expectation of the government. And I guess this is a warning that the climate crisis is here now. It's not the future anymore, right? And Brazil is feeling it in our scheme. We are feeling it, and it's very hard to be within inside of the government, trying to help and to mobilize this huge machine that the government is. But we are responsible for that, and we take the responsibility to deal with that. And I think I'm just providing this context because indeed climate change, sustainable development was in the center when we talked about the concept of our G20 presidency last year. Under the motto building a just world and thinking about climate change, I think Brazil has trying to bring to G20 creativity, right? We need more blended finance. We don't have enough fiscal resources to deal with the crisis. We have for the first time a task force to fight climate change. We have a task force for sustainable finance, a sustainable finance working group actually. And I think it's important to highlight the priorities of this working group. You're gonna be seeing results of that working group next month, probably during the annual meetings. We have the final meeting of the Minister of Finance in DC, in Washington. This week, actually tomorrow, we have our meeting of the Minister of International Affairs, the chancellors at the UN. And in both meetings, climate and sustainable development are in the center of the discussions. And just to bring more concrete data for you, during our presidency, there are 4 priorities of the Sustainable Finance Working Group that we are dealing with and where we want to deliver results to. So optimizing access to international environment and climate funds, advancing credible, robust, and just transition plans, financing nature-based solutions, implementing sustainability reporting requirements that work for all, including small and medium enterprises and emerging markets and developing economies. We do want to take the opportunity that Alicia is here with us and just highlight the central role that the multilateral development institutions are having in our presidency during the G20. I think that bringing the banks together to find solutions, to think about how to bring the private sector closer to us. We are building big programs in Brazil. There is one specific example called Eco Invest. We are mobilizing $2 billion. And this program has 4 pillars. 2 of the pillars are intended to mobilize private sector capital. So we're really trying to bring public money, but also private money to this agenda. We cannot deal alone with the issues we are facing now. So I think one of the things, Jason, that I really would like to maybe leave as a message for this first question that you made is that we need to be creative, right? We need to have more blended finance, use more of that, bring all stakeholders we can bring together to find solutions, because I don't think that the blame game works at this moment. We are all in the middle of the fires, literally, in Brazil. So we need more and more environments like this to discuss, but we need action as well.
Yeah. And I think Renata as well, the leadership that Brazil is playing, going back to the importance of Latin America and the Caribbean for global challenges on sustainable development. I mean, Brazil is advancing this, right? You're advancing this through the G20. You'll be advancing this at COP and through a number of different forums. Now, Alicia, Renata mentioned the important role that institutions like CAF play. It's commonly known that Latin America is this biodiversity powerhouse, and institutions like CAF have an incredibly important role. From your perspective, what's the relevance of the region for global biodiversity? And I know we'll be having that conversation as well at COP16 in Cali, where the Atlantic Council is pleased to be partnering with CAF and some sessions at the CAF Pavilion. So, what are the opportunities there, and what are you seeing across the region for how the issues in Latin America can be relevant on a global scale?
Well, thank you very much. First of all, thanks for inviting us to be part of this panel. I think that we are now in a very important moment to change the paradigm, and I think that Renata was clear in stressing the role that Brazil is playing with the presidency of G20, but we also have the next year the COP30, now we have the COP16 on biodiversity in Cali, and I think this is the moment perhaps of changing the point of view of all these negotiations, all these conversations, and of course Latin America and the Caribbean region has a very important role to play, because you have mentioned that this is a region of solutions in terms of renewable energies, the critical minerals, but also food security is very important. And of course, the 60% of the biodiversity is in the region, in America, in South America, and Central America and the Caribbean. So it means that we have the potential to have a strong voice in the negotiation. And sometimes I think that the problem is that we are not able to find these spaces where we can have a single voice. Sometimes we are very divided, and I think that we have the opportunity now. And in CAF, this is something we are promoting. You have mentioned the problem in the Amazon is terrible, but if you consider the Amazon, of course, it's not only Brazil, but 8 countries are affected by the Amazon. And so we need to work in processes that go beyond the national borders. We need to promote an ecosystemic approach, which means that we need to focus in the problems of the ecosystem. And sometimes this is difficult. I think that the institutions like CAF, we are trying to have innovative instruments that go beyond one single country, because we consider that unless we are able to work together, you can solve the problem in Brazil, but you will have the problem in Bolivia, in Venezuela.
Sustainable development doesn't know borders.
Yeah, that's the problem. So this is something we are trying to do. And also, another important thing regarding this new voice of Latin America, or this strong voice of Latin America and the Caribbean in the negotiations, is that we need to focus on the problems of the real people. If you talk with people, if you talk about biodiversity or climate change, probably they know, or they might not know. What they see is that they are very affected by the climate change, the fisheries are destroyed, the mangroves are destroyed, the wetlands. So they see the problems, and it's up to us to really solve the problems, not only to explain this comes because many years ago the CO2 emissions. No, we need to really face the problems and look at this in a different manner with new innovative instruments. We can talk about that later, but I think
Mauricio, I want to turn to you, but I think one of the things I'm hearing so far from Alicia and Renata is both Latin America and the Caribbean is home to a lot of the sustainable development challenges, but it's also a region where there are many solutions that can be offered writ large on a global perspective. Obviously, the challenges vary depending on what part of the region, whether it's the fires and floods in Brazil or hurricanes in the Caribbean. I mean, the microclimates across the region really have those specific individual impacts on how sustainable development is being able to be moved forward. Mauricio, you as part of your background is being finance and energy minister. So I'd like to get your perspective as the world is seeking to embark in energy transition and trying to reach that goal of 1.5 degree Celsius. Is there room, or what room could there be for Latin America and the Caribbean to even further offer some of the many innovative solutions that we're seeing in regard to clean energy. How can those be applied across beyond the region, and what type of appetite is there?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Jason, for having me here. I'm humbled to be surrounded by these two very important and powerful women, representing two engines that are very important for this conversation, Brazil on the one hand and CAF on the other. Congratulations for the work you're doing at the council and all the team. Look, I think it's always important to put this in perspective. For the first time in many, many years, decades, we're not part of the problem. We didn't cause all these elements of the current kind of like global challenges. Climate change on the one hand, pandemics, conflict, hunger, and Latin America can actually be part of the solution. So the key word here is solution. It's always said that Latin America never misses an opportunity to miss an opportunity. So we cannot afford that. This is our opportunity. This is our time. And that basically helps us, first of all, elevate the conversation, show Latin America as a powerful force that can be solving some of these global challenges. And Latin America's views and positions carry more weight now if we are able to explain what we want and get the level of attention and traction. So on the energy transition, of course, we're part of the solution. We have a very clean energy matrix, and that basically means that the starting point is very good. But we need to work in making sure that we produce not just clean electricity, but that we transform that electricity into new products that are products with a lower carbon footprint, manufacturing, agricultural products that the world needs. So point number one is, yes, we need to continue developing our clean energy. We need to diversify it a bit more because we're too dependent on hydro at a time when climate changes creates a lot of fluctuations in terms of the availability of water. So it is important for us to diversify. On the other hand, we have to use that asset that we have to make sure that we reindustrialize Latin America. Latin America has been deindustrializing for too long. We need to make sure that we, in this new generation of industrial development, producing the clean cement or the green cement, steel, products of that kind, that we are able to develop the technologies. Latin America can also play a very important role, and Brazil is already making huge progress in that front on a new generation of biofuels. So eventually we're going to use biofuels for aviation, and we need to make sure that we produce that. So with that lens, which is the energy transition and decarbonization, I think we have a lot to do. One aspect that I would highlight is that, as it's the case everywhere else in the world, more clean energy also means more transmission. You have to expand the grid. So one thing that we need in the region desperately is more integration in terms of energy transmission, so that we can move energy around from the northern part of South America to the southern parts of South America, from South America to Central America, more integration in that front, which means regional public goods. And that's where the multilateral and the regional development banks play a very important role. So my sense is, in the energy space, we're in a good position. We have a strong asset that no one else has, and we just need to make sure that we take advantage of it, producing not just the electricity, but many, many other products down the chain that can have this low carbon footprint.
And I think Mauricio as well, recognizing as well that certain countries are going to be able to advance quicker in that energy transition than others, just given various dependencies. But I think one thing that's important is that we see in all the work that we do, citizen demands, right? And there's citizenry across the region is largely frustrated in many regards, frustrated with whether it's everywhere from insecurity to economic perspectives, economic growth. And so ultimately it's also a question of how does sustainable development also benefit the citizens, the people that we care so much and work so much for every day. And so I want to maybe start with you, Renata. how do you see this opportunity for Latin America and the Caribbean to be an even greater supplier of solutions at a global level? How could that also, whether it's biodiversity, whether it's food security, whether it's energy transitions, how does that also potentially benefit the people, benefit Brazilians as well? Actually, we've done some work at the Atlantic Council on food security and Brazil's role, but where do you see the ultimate benefits for people that are wanting these solutions to help to improve their daily lives?
Excellent. I think one of the priorities of the Brazilian G20 presidency is talk about sustainable development in 3 dimensions, right? Economic, social, and environment. So we need to talk about the 3 of them. And on the social pillar of this discussion, we have been, since last year, actually, the Minister of Planning and Budget is responsible to build the 4-year plans of Brazil, the multi-year plan, right, 2024 to 2027. And one thing we did for the first time last year was to travel the 27 states of the country to hear the population, what they wanted to see reflected in the PPA, pluriannual plan that we call. And this was really interesting, was a very interesting exercise we did, was a lot of traveling, but it was worth it because we had a platform where we heard what people wanted. And actually the #1 priority for the multi-year plan was climate change. People wanted, maybe because Marina Silva, the minister, is such a good lobbyist, so she asked votes for her thing, and she got it. But also we had gender, teenagers and childhood, indigenous people, racial equity. This was all cross-cutting priorities we have in our plan now. And I think from listening from the citizens, from the population last year, the fight against hunger and poverty was one really high demand that Brazil needed to do something. And that's why with the G20 presidency and the summit we have in November in Rio, we are launching the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty that was pre-launched in July in Rio. I think the alliance it's extraordinary in the sense that it's open to everyone, not only for G20 countries. We are actually, since the pre-launch, in the moment of gathering resources, and countries are applying to get resources from the Global Alliance. And from our part, the Ministry of Planning, we are very much involved because the IDB and the African Development Bank are using special drawing rights to channel money for the alliance. So it's amazing to see that part of the work, how we are managing to get money and resources, and how they're going to be channeled to the citizens and beyond, way beyond the G20. Yeah. So this is, I think this is one perspective where I see the citizens' demand being responded, but I don't know, you wanted to?
No, I think that's right, and I think, Alicia, when you're from the CAF perspective, which is very much focused on improving sustainable opportunities for economic growth across the region, how do you see this role insofar as Latin America and the Caribbean being critical to solving broader global challenges? How does that ultimately help to also improve the lives that you're seeking to improve at CAF?
This is a very crucial question because we need to focus on the needs of the countries. As you know, the CAF is a development bank. Our shareholders are the clients.
Right.
And this is one peculiarity of this bank. We have not a mandate coming from other countries, but from the countries. And so we understand, or we try to understand the real needs of the people. And I think this is crucial. We need to be innovative in the instruments we develop. For instance, now we are giving subsidized interest when the operations are 100% green. And I think this is very important that we gave the right signals. One of the problems of biodiversity or green ecosystems is that sometimes we are not able to give a value. I will not speak about price because perhaps this is a little bit tricky, but value. We need to give the value. The multilateral development banks, we need to really develop our instruments and conversations, and I think that there is important discussion in the G20 about that. Yeah. It's not easy because at the very end, we talk with the ministers of finance or public credit, and sometimes the conversation is not easy. But now we see that the conversation between the ministers of environment and ministers of finance is improving, because, for instance, with instruments such as the green bonds or the biodiversity certificates, there is a need for them to understand each other. The language need to evolve. And I think this is an opportunity, and we, the multilateral development banks, need to promote these kind of spaces and make possible that our credits, for instance, in infrastructures, in energy, in water, introduce all these green components. Mauricio has talked about transition, and I would mention the transitions. It's not only the energy, but also the agricultural, the impacts of climate change, the economic transition. So we need to put all the pieces together, and the Sudoku sometimes is very difficult to solve.
Well, Mauricio, I'd love to get your perspective. I mean, as a former former minister, hold multiple ministerial posts. I mean, it's so important to think about sustainable development as affecting not just the environment ministry or whatnot, but it's really an opportunity across ministries in many countries. And so how do you really kind of unlock that potential, especially with regard to the tremendous benefits that can be seen across the region with, again, Latin America and the Caribbean playing that important role in a global perspective to help with whether it's global biodiversity challenges, whether it's global food security challenges, global energy transition challenge. There's a real opportunity for the region to be able to play this incredibly important role on the global stage. And so how do you work across ministries to really be able to capture that opportunity?
Yeah, well, these challenges are all intertwined, so really they complement each other. So my view is Latin America can actually be an important solution to the climate crisis, because we have the natural resources, we have the biodiversity, we can be a crucial component of that solution. We can also provide the food that the world needs, because we have water, we have the soil. We're also the poster child, and Mexico in particular, of friendshoring. I mean, in a world where there is more trade tensions and protectionism, this is a region that is friendly. It's not threatening to any other region in the world. So we can engage with trade with anyone and be a reliable partner. So that means we have a lot of advantages. How do we generate the conversation, the domestic, internal conversation that all the sectors are aligned? Well, that requires a vision. That requires kind of like a sense of direction. And not all countries in the region are making progress in the same way. I mean, some countries are really ahead of others. I usually talk about Brazil. Brazil has not always been a good example and the example to follow. But today, in today's world, I think it is the example. I think Brazil is doing great things.
Repeat that.
And I'll tell you why. Because the private sector plays such an important role. The private sector is motivated, is investing, is basically expanding, is providing the solutions that the world needs. So the role of the private sector, whereas in Latin America, in those countries where you see that the government thinks it's going to have all the answers and can do everything, things are not moving forward. So taking advantage of these set of opportunities is not easy, but without the private sector, certainly this is not going to be the case. You won't be able to take advantage of all the opportunities. And I think Latin America also has to be more conscious and aware that there are certain global conversations where we need to be part of, and some of those conversations are going in the wrong direction. For example, protectionism. Protectionism is something that doesn't help us. So we understand the importance of carbon pricing. And if anything, in Latin America, we still have a lot of energy subsidies. We need to start reducing those energy subsidies and soon get into the conversation about carbon taxation. But we cannot afford having today in the region $100 tax per ton of CO2. That's not viable socially. So we need the understanding of the advanced economies that we can do something more gradual, more slow, differentiated with the advanced world, but that we shouldn't be punished for not having the price of carbon that Europe has. So we should be part of that conversation, say we're going to be part, we're going to bring the solutions, but make sure that we also have the conditions to solve some of the problems that we have, long-standing problems in the region related to poverty, inequality. So we need a much balanced approach. So my sense is the region is moving at different speeds. Brazil being one case, Costa Rica, the Dominican Republic, really good results. Other countries in the region, perhaps where there's more ideology involved, less so.
So Renata, Mauricio mentioned Brazil there in a favorable light, not just because you're on the panel. What kind of reaction? What kind of reaction is the Brazilian government getting from this focus? Whether it's a G20, and you're starting to think about preparing already for COP30, insofar as that leadership role on a global, these important global fora. For advancing sustainable development, are you getting the traction? You mentioned some of the alliances that are being created as part of the G20 process, but also how are you looking at the sustainability of some of these efforts beyond just November for the G20, or even looking to COP30, but also beyond COP30? Excellent question. I think my first reaction when I was listening to you, I'm like, I'm tired. I'm tired to all the traction we are getting, but I think it's a very nice moment, and I think of Brazil, these opportunities that we are having now of hosting G20, COP. We have BRICS next year as well. We have the annual meeting of the Caribbean Development Bank next year. Lots happening next year. I think it's opportunity to Brazil either lead or get out the way. We don't have a choice. I think specifically with regards to the G20, our presidency is working very closely to the South African presidency, which which has the presidency next year. And the idea is continuity, is that the work, for example, the Global Alliance, which is, I think, the biggest and the most important deliverable of this G20 presidency. We hope that it flourishes and gets bigger and remains in place, and that all the instruments from the development banks, but also from the private sector, they do work for channeling the resources where they need to go. So the idea is to have continuity. With this COP this year that we have in Azerbaijan, we are working with them for the deliverables of next year in Belém, in Pará. And the idea is to have a continuity, and it's not something from the government of Brazil, but from the group. So that's my hope. I have been working closely to our teams there in Brazil, and that's the idea, to deliver what we have to deliver now, but we need to work as a group for the years to come. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. Renata, I'll put a plug in here. The Atlantic Council has been involved with every COP, and we're already looking forward to our involvement at COP30 and being able to help to provide some of that sustainability. It's so important that Brazil, you're already thinking about that even far in advance of that. COP. Now, Mauricio mentioned the important role of the private sector, and so much of the work that we do here is about the bridge between the public sector and the private sector, because I firmly believe that is crucial. That's absolutely crucial to solving the challenges of today and tomorrow. Alicia, I want to get your perspective. How can multilateral, how is the CAF working with the private sector to try to move forward some of the opportunities that exist in sustainable development, both insofar as benefiting citizens in the region, but also, this is the Global Future Forum, but also insofar as potentially scaling up some of these solutions from a broader world perspective?
It's true that we cannot solve the problem only with public institutions, public money, public finance. We need the private sector, and what the institutions like CAF, what we can do is to create these conditions, what we call the enabling conditions for bringing the investment towards the countries. This means that to have a overarching approach. Security is one important consideration, and CAF, in fact, is working in close cooperation with the United States in terms of the security in the region, but also regulation, capacity building. We consider that we need to really promote the private sector invest in the region, and I think that is an important question here, which is the risk. We should talk more about risk, not only the climate change risk, which is clear, but also the risk related to the loss of biodiversity. For instance, the loss of biodiversity has an impact, of course, in agriculture, which is a very important sector in the region. And these kind of things are not usually very much considered in all the conversation and and if we work for that and we de-risk the investments of the private sector related to biodiversity loss, I think that we could change the dynamics and promote more private sector investment in the region. We are working with of course, with private sector. We still are working much more with the public sector as institutions, but I think that is needed to create more public private partnerships.
Yeah, and there is so much interest from so many companies to be part of the solution on sustainable development. And so opportunities for institutions like the CAF. It's so great that you're thinking about that, thinking about how to further work with the private sector. Mauricio, you brought the private sector beforehand. I'd like to get your perspective on maybe on how can, maybe from a government perspective, where are those opportunities to work with both international private sector, but also domestic private sector that's so important to protecting biodiversity, advancing food security. What other solutions could there be to really accelerate so we don't lose this opportunity? And we work as collaboratively across sectors as possible.
Well, I'll start from where I ended in the last question, which is the private sector needs stability, needs basically rules of the game that are credible, that are not being changed all the time, and I think that's very important. In the region, we're seeing countries where there is an excessive amount of uncertainty in that front, so that basically disincentivizes the private sector. That's one thing. Another aspect which I think is very important is that there are more public-private partnerships. I think that's a very important element in the conversation. There are many issues related with infrastructure, for example, where the partnerships can actually be developed, and that's also a very important role for the multilateral development banks. But since we're in New York, we're in the US, much of the work of the council is also kind of like targeted at the US audience. I think it is very important that the US understands first that the IDB Invest, which is a great arm to provide support to the private sector, is its capital is increased. That's being discussed now in the US Congress. Two, I think some of the measures that the US has adopted to accelerate the energy transition have a protectionist tone to it. Some countries that have access to free trade agreements with the United States are in a good condition, and there are 11 of such countries in the region, which is a big advantage. But other countries like Brazil or Argentina are not part of FTAs and could provide some of these critical minerals, for example, for the energy transition. So it is very important to expand those provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act, so minerals from Brazil can actually be used for the batteries of electric vehicles here in the United States. Same thing for Argentina. So, I mean, the region still needs to have that type of, in the case of critical minerals, it's an agreement with the US. Japan just signed one with the US. I think Brazil should benefit from that, Argentina as well. So my view is some decisions can be made at, in Washington, but of course, much of the action is in the region, and it's in the way governments approach this. My sense here is you can have governments from the left, the center, the right, but to the extent that they are pragmatic, that they follow policies that are effective, the results are going to be good. If there is no pragmatism and governments feel that for ideological, dogmatic reasons, certain sectors, certain areas should be reserved for government, I think that's where things don't move forward. Yeah. And I see that happening a lot in the case of minerals, in Bolivia, in Chile somehow, in Colombia as well. A more pragmatic approach, like the one we're seeing in Brazil, I think is really the way to go in terms of taking advantage of the opportunities that we have.
And there's been a lot of efforts by the U.S. specifically on critical minerals, but I think some of the criticism is it's come a little bit late, right? So there's a little bit of a catch-up game insofar as the securing of those supply chains. Renata, Mauricio was talking about public-private partnerships. I'd like to get you traveled the whole country. You're mentioning beforehand listening to citizens, but what do you see insofar as successful? What are some of the successful initiatives from the Brazilian government perspective? What is the administration doing to be able to advance those PPPs? and maybe how are those being advanced in a way that they hadn't been advanced previously, and how is this government seeking to unlock opportunities to work with the private sector specifically on sustainable development?
No, excellent. Just before answering you, I just wanted to echo what Mauricio just said on the necessity of pragmatism, because I think this makes all the difference in bringing the private sector together, and we need money from the private sector. We don't have enough fiscal resources to solve all the problems we have right now. So I think this is crucial. The PPPs are being treated in Brazil also as a priority. We have the Growth Acceleration Plan of the country, the PAC. We have more than almost 200 projects only related with actually regional integration for the region. So there are a lot of projects that the ultimate goal is to integrate South America. A lot of private money involved. And we have several PPPs going on the energy sector as well, one of the sectors you mentioned. And there is one I wanted to mention. There is a public-private partnership that is playing an increasingly important role in Brazil. It's the name is Solario Carioca project in Rio, and I'm mentioning Rio because, well, we're gonna have G20, always about Rio, right? And it involves the installation of a solar power plant on a decommissioned landfill in Santa Cruz. And Solario Carioca, why I mentioned, because it's a milestone in the city's energy transition in Rio. It's going to have like 5 megawatts. It's going to be huge, and that's only one example of PPP in a sector that I believe it's very crucial to all the discussion we are having here today. It's crucial for I don't know if you saw the speech of the president this morning. Energy transition and climate change were at the center of his speech. So I believe that from all the sectors where the private sector can invest in the country, definitely regional integration and energy transition are at the core of the priorities of the country, where the projects need money and where we really need the expertise, also not only the money but also the expertise of the private sector.
Wonderful. I want to make sure that we have time to take a question or two from the audience. So if you have a question, my colleague Lucy will be there with a microphone. So please make yourself raise your hand, and we'll get to you. But I want to, Alicia, just to drill down a little bit more on the importance again of how the region's opportunities can be translated to a global perspective, and specifically the focus that CAF has played on and continues to play on sustainable development across the region. What are you seeing insofar as opportunities to work with constituencies? Because CAF is focused on Latin America, but actually has presence in many places around the world. So how is CAF trying to work with constituencies outside of the hemisphere to move this agenda forward?
I think that to create alliances is crucial for the region, and we are working on that. Actually, last year we promoted a meeting of ministers of finance of Latin America and the Caribbean with the ministers of finance of the European Union. Mauricio was there and Renata were there too. And I think that this is very important to really make possible the alliances and the understanding of the problems. For instance, the food security in the European Union or the energy transition in Europe depends on critical minerals or food from Latin America and the Caribbean, and sometimes every region lives closed in itself. So this is crucial. We have been working with the European Union and also promoting investments through the Global Gateway Initiative. We are working, of course, in the cooperations Global South with African countries. I think it's important that we are able to put the problems on the table, common problems, and of course with the United States. I think it's crucial. You have mentioned many issues, and they also mentioned that. I think that, for instance, the impact of climate change is creating a migration. 16 million people could migrate from Latin America and the Caribbean to United States or other countries. So this is a security problem. And sometimes we need to really translate these environmental questions in real problems
Yeah.
for people: lack of food, lack of security, the problems in the coast. So I think that it's crucial that we really are able to bring all these questions to other fora. We are working very much at hemispheric level, and we think that we are making good progress on that.
That's great. I want to ask Mauricio, again, if you have a question, just raise your hand, and Lucy will get to you. Okay, I'm going to ask Mauricio a question, then we'll get to yours. But Mauricio, I just want to get, you're traveling a lot. You thankfully have global entry, so you get into JFK, no problem. What are you hearing when you're traveling around the world? What type of, are you hearing excitement about the opportunities that Latin America and the Caribbean can provide for helping to solve the world's broader sustainable development challenges? Or is the region still not yet on the radar screen of others insofar as how it can be that key to some of these solutions that frankly countries around the world are seeking to?
Well, I'm going to give a short answer because there are questions here, but the honest answer is that not enough. We're not getting enough attention. The world is not really paying attention to Latin America. I think we need to elevate the conversation. Good that the Atlantic Council is having Latin America as one of the sessions today, but we need to do a lot more, and the way to do that, in my view, is to make sure that we come to the global conversation with really a portfolio of solutions. Like we say, well, the world needs products that have certain characteristics, and they are green products, and they're done in countries that are reliable, trustworthy trade partners that respect environmental and labor standards. I mean, we need to make sure that we do all of that, and I think the world needs that. But we still have a lot of work to do to make sure that we get enough attention. I'll be frank. I mean, in events like the World Economic Forum, in Davos, the issues of Latin America are not getting enough attention.
I agree.
Good that we're not the problem that needs to be solved. That's good. But we're not there yet to say, yeah, we are the solution.
And so great then that Brazil is playing such a role in hosting G20 and COP30 and other important global fora. I'm going to go to your question. If you could say just your name and affiliation and a short question. Yeah.
Sure. So firstly, thank you very much to the panel. My name is Tatiana Sharp. I'm a fellow at the Atlantic Council Millennium Leadership Program, and I'm the CEO and founder of Global Impact Network, which is a startup born out of Stanford University. Renata, I believe you mentioned the Task Force for Sustainable Development Finance in Brazil, and firstly, it's such an honor to hear from you. You also mentioned reporting on sustainable development progress, so I'm wondering how is that reporting framework working, and more specifically, how are you measuring impact towards the sustainable development goals? Because as a global society, if we don't know how we're progressing towards achieving them, we won't know where to invest and create value in the future. So I'd be really interested to hear how you're measuring impact.
Excellent. Should I answer? Yeah.
Please, was there a second question or just the one? Was it? I think just the one question, was that? There's a second question. Okay, so we'll take both questions together.
Hello. Sorry, I'm running a little bit late. My name is Peter Liu. I'm the CEO of Alar Ring. We're in the, you call it nuclear fusion, whatever, but we're in the clean energy. We already signed up the MOU with Brazil government and with University of Sao Paulo with the e-pen system. So next year you're going to see our technology. Let me share with you what the global view. Our technology being invented in California. The Brazilian government coming to us 5 times this year. We signed MOU because it's a little bit confused. Everybody talking about there are 50 companies in the nuclear fusion. We called it 2 years ago, we say it's clean energy first. It's a platform, clean energy plus net zero. Okay, that's solved the overall. Then you have policy, we have contents.
Sir, can I get to
Yeah,
your
sorry,
question?
just
Please.
2 more minutes. So we're already rolled up, okay? We have an educational system called Alpha E to teach the new generation at the school, university, to develop fusion. So Brazil congratulations. We're looking forward to seeing you in Amazon next year, COP30. Thank you.
Belen,
Wonderful,
Belen.
thank you. So Renata, I think both questions and comments are to you.
Let me just, I think the second was more comment, and thank you Mauricio for the congratulations. That was not agreed up front. But on your question, the Sustainable Development Goals are being measured actually, and we are taking care of them in a platform that is connected with the multi-year plan 2024-2027. So actually, at the website of the Ministry of Planning and Budget, you can see the development of the goals. And also within the presidency of Brazil, I'm part of a committee, and it involves all the ministries on the measurements and how are we progressing with the SDGs. So I think you can find publicly easily in the websites, first in the Ministry of Planning and Budget, but also within the presidency, there is a committee dedicated on the development and the progression on the SDGs.
Thank you so much, Renata. So I think clear takeaways from this panel: a real demand from citizens across the region to do more to advance sustainable development, incredible opportunities for the region to continue to be a powerhouse for those global solutions, but at the same time, and Mauricio, you were mentioning there's still a lack of recognition from the broader global community insofar as how Latin America and the Caribbean can help to advance sustainability, as well as the important role of the private sector. There are many people here in this audience from the private sector. We work with on sustainable development issues for quite some time with Coca-Cola on these issues across the region, and many others here that care deeply about these issues. And so how do we continue to advance those opportunities for public-private partnerships to really capture the opportunity that Latin America provides insofar as not only feeling the impacts of development challenges, but also being part of those broader solutions. So to the panel, Renata, Mauricio, Alicia, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks all for watching this panel.